Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Happy Friday. Welcome back to P for P. I am Will Brooks. I'm glad to be here with you guys today. And I have a really cool guest this morning that I've been reading about the last couple of days. I'm excited to have him join us. We have Todd Kelly, who is someone who has fought battles most of us can only imagine in the courtroom, in service, and in faith. Todd, you are you've got the Kelly Law Firm, or is it Longhorn? What is it? What's tell me the right name of the firm.
It is the Kelly Law Firm, but we do business as Lone Star Legal.
Lone Star Legal. That's right. That's what it is. It's a cool name. That's a great name. Welcome to the show, man. I'm super glad to have you on with us today.
Honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. So let's get down to it. I want to know, I was reading about you and you've said that you're an utter failure without your Savior, Jesus Christ. That's a really incredibly honest statement for a lawyer to make. I want to know when faith became the foundation for your work and your life, not just a part of your life and your work, but the foundation for it.
Well, I would have to say that is a journey that's been a lifelong journey, but it really became the foundation probably starting in about 2015. So about 10 years ago.
Okay.
It really became such a foundational part of who I am. But it took being broken, before I could get there and crawling up high enough to sort of see where I needed to go. And it only happens through Jesus' grace, man. And like I said, and I meant it. If it wasn't for him, I'm an utter failure.
Wow, that's powerful stuff, man. And it's a powerful statement for an attorney to make. I was also reading that you kind of say that being a lawyer is a calling for you, not a career. I find that to be a really powerful statement. My mother is a retired ordained Methodist minister, and she's talked to me a lot about how she was called, and it wasn't when she was very, very young. I think she was 26, 27 years old when she kind of felt that calling and went to seminary and did the whole thing. And it was a calling for her. And I've read that you kind of say that being a lawyer was a calling for you. I want to know what that distinction means to you as far as it being a calling.
So it's interesting. I'm still a work in progress, but
I think we all are.
Right? But the calling for me means that it's more important than being a job. It's more important than providing food on the table. It's more important than all of that. It's doing something that matters in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I have learned over the course of the last 10 years is that our profession really is intended to be a way to spread God's message and to spread the word and to live out what Jesus told us to live out, which is to serve others. And I can't think of a way that I serve others more than in this particular career role. That may change at some point. I may get enlightened that something else is supposed to be what I do, but up to now, this is how I help people.
Right. I love that, man. I love the idea of a calling, and I think there's lots of ways that we can be called to service. And when you do find that calling and you hear it and you recognize it, whatever it is, it's a super powerful thing. And I think when you follow that calling, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna succeed, and you are gonna end up helping people in the way that you're supposed to help them. So, absolutely love that, man. So you are talk to me a little bit about the law firm and the kind of work that you do. It seems like you guys are taking on pretty hard emotional cases involving deep injustice. Tell me a little bit about the firm and what you guys are doing.
So our firm started. It's interesting. We restarted, I should say, about a year and a half ago. I had been with a larger firm here in the area, and it just gotten to a point where I thought, okay, it was time to reopen my law firm. The Kelly Law Firm had existed in a different iteration years ago, and it was just time to redo that. And my wife is also a lawyer, and so we did that together. And so it's it is a joint venture, and we have, you're right, we have cases, a lot of cases involving sexual assault. We actually handle some human trafficking cases. And we also handle some very seriously injured people involved in commercial truck wrecks and things like that. And so you're seeing people when they are their most broken, and you are the only light that they have to justice. You're the only way that they're ever going to see that. And we try to focus on being a light. And Jesus led with love, and Jesus is the light, and we're intended to be a reflection of that. And so every day in our office, we have a morning huddle. The huddle doesn't last very long, but we check in on our team. We find out what's going on, what's good, what's bad, who needs praise, who needs lifting up, and we end each meeting in prayer. God is very central to what we're doing here, and it's important. And so again, we want to shine a light of hope where there is no hope. The other thing that we try to do is allow grace to our opposing counsel. I've heard others on here and good lawyers who have a different approach. But my approach is, I want to allow grace to opposing counsel. We're all human. There's going to be times when we need a favor from a friend or a favor even from an enemy. As long as we can do it without hurting our clients, my goal is to always be graceful to the other side. And so that's kind of a nutshell, I think.
That's super refreshing to hear. I was talking with an attorney last week on the pod here, and he mentioned something to me that I found interesting. He was talking about the and I can't remember exactly when he said he kind of started seeing this, but the lack of civility between the opposing counsel that there is now. And he kind of attributed a lot of it to being how much is being done virtually now, as opposed to being done face to face. And it's a whole lot easier to be rude and curt and short and have a lot of animosity if you're just looking at each other through screens, as opposed to being in the room together. And he's a big advocate for being face to face and for, allowing grace, like he said. And I think it's harder for people to not have that grace when we are face to face physically with each other. I don't know if that's something that you agree with or not, but I thought it was interesting that he brought that up about a week ago, and you're kind of leaning in the same direction.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in terms of the keyboard warrior aspect, but maybe that is true. The fact that we're, that we do see each other mostly by a Zoom link or something else may have something to do with it. But, the truth of the matter is, even over that technological, advantage, which I actually like for a lot of reasons that are more specific to my cases than anything else.
Of course. Yeah, there's definitely advantages to it, but I just thought it was interesting the way he brought that up.
Oh, it is. But the truth is, we don't, we can disagree without being disagreeable, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that don't agree with me about a lot of things. Doesn't mean I have to be disagreeable with them.
Yeah, I agree. And I imagine that you that grace that you practice with your opposing counsel is something that you're bringing to your clients as well. I know a lot of people associate law with logic and not grace. So I want to know how you integrate compassion and forgiveness into your with when you're working with your clients as well.
In my experience, we have the hardest time forgiving ourselves, right? More than forgiving others. It's hard to forgive ourselves. And I think when we talk to our clients, frequently my clients are talking about the things that they did wrong, especially when we're talking about in the sexual assault arena.
Sure.
I have clients who are constantly telling me what they did wrong, how they put themselves in a situation, and really trying to, talk with those victims and let them know that you need to give yourself some grace. You need to allow yourself the understanding that all you did was what a normal person would do. And sometimes that's really, really difficult. When we really start working a case up, one of the things that we do, and if anybody on here is listening that has been through the Trial Lawyers College, which is a training that I have had, one of the things that we do is we really try to walk a mile in our client's shoes. We try to see the world through their eyes as best we can, through some pretty in-depth work that we do with them. Sometimes we bring in professionals to actually help us do that, some psychiatrists that help us walk through those processes so that we really feel what they feel. And so I think some of that grace is born out of the fact that, hey, I felt it too. I mean, it happened to you, but I felt it with you when we went through that process.
Amazing. I love that. I love that way of looking at things and yeah, reminding people to give themselves grace is such an important thing. That's amazing stuff. I want to shift gears for a second. I want to talk a little bit. I was reading that you've testified before Congress about forced arbitration, and helped spark some real change in that area. Before we get too deep into that experience, for listeners out there who may not be familiar, explain what forced arbitration is for me.
So there's not going to be a listener who hasn't already agreed to pre-dispute, binding, non-appealable, no jury arbitration. It's in so many of our contracts. If you buy a car from a dealer, if you buy a cell phone, if you buy anything, you purchase a home, anything, there's going to be an arbitration provision in that contract. And I'll tell you what arbitration is. When we left England, the Star Chamber was actually closed down by the time that our founders left England. But there were still practices going on by the king that mimicked the Star Chamber. And what the Star Chamber was they called it a court of justice, but it was basically where a serf could go and try to get some sort of justice, against the nobleman. Well, you might imagine how often the noblemen who appointed the judges to the Star Chamber were successful versus the serfs.
Sure.
And it amazes me that we founded this country in large part to get away from that system of justice. And then we have implemented it ourselves in a process called arbitration. So when you go to arbitration, you agree to give up a jury. You agree, an arbitrator can make a ruling that is contrary to law, and it's still not appealable. You give up your right to appeal. And the stats are pretty staggering that the corporations who engage in arbitration win 92% of the time, as opposed to the people that are bringing the claims. And a win is pretty liberally categorized. Basically, if the person bringing the claim wins anything, that's considered a win for them, even if that amount of money doesn't cover the medical bills that were caused. So I fought arbitration, as you said, pretty extensively.
Yeah.
And even in Congress, and we had some success in a very, very narrow window, which was a case that I was working on. We found some success there, but arbitration still permeates our world.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the success that case? So
that case involved a sexual assault that occurred over in Iraq. My client was a military contractor, was assaulted by other military contractors, and the company was trying to force her into an arbitration, a quiet and secret arbitration, which is part of the deal,
right?
Which was part of her employment contract with them. And we were able to go into the court. The lower court ruled that, yeah, she agreed to arbitration, but sexual assault wasn't part of her job, that we're going to take that outside of the arbitration provision. He was the first judge to have ever ruled that way. Every other judge had ruled, no, this is arbitrable. So that issue went up to the Fifth Circuit. Fifth Circuit agreed with the lower court, and the company then appealed it to the Supreme Court. While it was on appeal at the Supreme Court, Congress was holding hearings over this very issue. And we were able to go in. We testified to subcommittees of Congress. There was some really great questioning by some of the congressmen, and ultimately the Congress ruled and voted that and I think it was a rider to the appropriations bill that year, that any military contractor with a contract in excess of $1 million who forced sexual assault, sexual harassment, and rape victims into arbitration would lose their contracts.
Wow.
Well, the military contractor that we were fighting was one of the largest in the world. So you can imagine their contract exceeded $1 million.
Sure.
They pulled their appeal from the Supreme Court as soon as that happened, because that would have been them fighting to force arbitration, so they would have lost their contracts. The end of that story is not as happy as I would like for it to have been, but the change that we made was important.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So you did not have to go all the way to the Supreme Court. It stopped at Congress. That's where you kind of.
Yeah, they pulled it. The Supreme Court never got to hear the case because they pulled their appeal.
Well, that means you did your job. What was that experience like, testifying before Congress?
So at that time in my life, so you asked about when I found Jesus, right?
Yep.
At that time in my life, I hadn't found him yet, and so I was pretty full of myself. If I'm really honest, I had a lot of pride. I had a lot of ambition, and I thought, man, I'm testifying in front of Congress. I'm kind of a big deal, you know.
Yeah.
And it was enlightening. The number of people who thought that, for instance, that they could just come in and speak with my client without me present. They would ask me to leave the room to speak with my client. The number of people that thought that was okay just shocked me. And a lot of them were lawyers. And I thought, she's got an active case. There's no way in the world you're kicking me out of this room. But it was shocking how many people thought, you can be excused, counselor. And I'm like, no, wow. I cannot. You're not going to talk with her without my presence.
Yeah. That seems like common sense to me, but wow. But that sounds like it was a pretty powerful experience. I thank you for the work you did on that. And I want to say thank you for your service. I know you were a Marine. Were you a judge advocate as well?
I was. I started as a combat engineer. And then during my service, I got picked up for a program and went to law school, and then came back and served as a judge advocate before I got out.
Well, thank you for your service. Very much appreciate that, and I'm sure that case probably meant a lot to you, having served served in the military, and I'm sure you were overseas at some point. So I'm sure that hit home a lot for you. Someone having that experience overseas.
You know what hit home was the number of people who would come out during that case and talk about how unpatriotic it was that I would represent this woman against a military contractor. And it just shocked me how people that had never put a uniform on and had no idea about the people that they were talking about, because my client was just as patriotic as I was. She may not have been doing it in the uniform, but she did it for the country. And to have heard people publicly talk about how unpatriotic we were was amazing.
Yeah. People's thoughts on that are often, they waffle all over the place on that stuff. So, wow, that's amazing. So, I want to talk a little bit about your wife. Is Robbie, right? That's your wife?
Correct.
You guys have got the firm together. I want to talk a little bit about working together, and because the show's called Partnerships for Profit. I like the partnership part a lot, and that can be a difficult partnership. Marriage is difficult enough as it is, but working in a business with your spouse, I'm just kind of curious how you guys work together, how you found that has maybe it's helped your marriage, maybe it's made it stronger. I'm just a little curious about that dynamic and how that works for you guys.
So we're best friends, and that has a lot to do with a strong marriage. It also has a lot to do with a strong partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the fact that we're married, the fact that we both know we're headed for the same end goal, makes it really, really easy to trust each other. For the most part, we have our own lanes. Robbie is the managing partner of the firm, and in the truest sense of the word, she really doesn't try cases anymore. She doesn't litigate cases. She is managing the business aspect of the firm, making sure that we have what we need. There's another lawyer who, incidentally, was at one point in time my boss at a different firm, who works with us, and he and I litigate. And I have a very high level of trust and respect, obviously, for him as well. And so those are the three lawyers in our small startup firm right now. But the trust that we have is intense. And I brought, his name's Rob. I brought Rob into the conversation just because it's important to understand that trust translates, right?
Sure.
And so with Robbie, she's doing what she's doing. And it's not that she does it in a vacuum, but she pretty much has her lane. And if she has questions, then we talk about it. And I have mine. And so I'm running the litigation team. And if I have questions, we talk about it. But literally, and right now we're working from home. Whole issue of mold at our offices has ran everybody back to home. So we're doing everything by Zoom these days. But my office is downstairs and hers is upstairs. There's two sets of closed doors I have to get to her right now. And we stay in those lanes, physically and, figuratively for the most part. And so it allows us to sort of collaborate about the things that we're thinking we ought to be doing or not doing, but not to step on each other's toes. And I think because we set it up that way, it really works. I mean,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. I've worked on a lot of projects with my wife, and we do the same thing. We kind of know our lanes, and I'm in my office right now. My office is downstairs. She has an office upstairs in the house. And if we are working on the same project together, we come together when we need to, and we're doing our own thing. And I think that makes perfect sense. That's how it works for us as well. When we do happen to be working on projects together. We haven't done so in a while, but we've done a lot in the past. And that's how it worked. People are always like, how do you do this with your wife? Don't you guys get at each other's throats? And I'm like, we really don't, because like we know what each person does well, and then we bring it together when it makes sense to bring it together. So
I find it to be really rewarding, to be honest.
Me too. Yeah. Me too. I think it strengthens a relationship personally.
Yeah.
And especially like you said, if you kind of know, and I think it applies to business as well. We talk about this a lot in our business. I've talked about this in the show before. Right person, right seat is such an important part of business. I think it's an important part of a relationship too, and knowing who does what the best and letting them do their thing. So that's great, man. Love to hear that for you and Robbie, that you guys have kind of worked that out and it's working well for you.
Thank you.
I know that's not always the case for people who work with family or with a spouse. It doesn't always work out quite so well. So that's awesome for you guys. Let's talk a little bit about the Seventh Amendment. I know that's a super important thing for you. You I think I read that you've warned that if we lose the Seventh Amendment, we'll lose the rest of the Constitution, I guess. Why is that constitutional protection so crucial to you, and how does it tie into the moral side of justice?
So the Seventh Amendment is the only guarantee that we have to hold the wealthy and powerful in our nation accountable for wrongs, right? That's it. And it's the only protection that we have really from the tyranny that I talked about earlier that our founding fathers left England to avoid, right? They wanted to get away from that system of justice. And so we set up a system where, in all controversies in excess of $20, and it's interesting that has never been changed. It's still $20 today.
It was $20 when it was added into the Constitution?
Yes. In the Seventh Amendment, it was in all controversies exceeding the amount of $20, the right to trial by jury shall not be infringed. And so the infringement upon that right, it involves things like arbitration that we talked about a minute ago, but it also involves, we hear all the time that caps on damages. That is an infringement upon a jury's right to decide a case. And I think it's born maybe from a good place in some people. And I know it's not born in a good place from all, but it may be born from a good place in some people. But if it ignores the fact that a jury of 12 who hears all of the admissible evidence in a case is who renders those verdicts that you're then capping. When I've had verdicts that have had a cap on them, and I've been allowed to talk to a jury after the verdict is rendered, especially when that verdict has been in excess of the cap, and sometimes far in excess of the cap, when they learn that the case is capped and that their verdict literally meant nothing.
Right.
It's amazing to see the changes in faces and the way that people are so disgusted by the fact that this person is going to be deprived justice. And the problem is that and I'm talking about caps, and you've asked about the Seventh Amendment, but they're kind of the opposite sides of the same coin. If you have the cap, you don't have an uninfringed right to a trial by jury. Now, there are some appellate judges that disagree with me, but they're wrong. And I'll tell them to their face they're wrong, because you cannot call something uninfringed when you cap it. By definition, that's an infringement. And so when we give away our rights by voting for caps, by voting to allow these arbitration provisions and that sort of thing, we are giving away piece by piece our right to trial by jury, which is the only right that holds the wealthy and the powerful accountable when they do wrong. And so what's to stop if there's nothing there? So let's eviscerate the Seventh Amendment because we're on our way. So let's take it away and say we have no Seventh Amendment. We have no right to that trial. What's to stop the wealthy and the powerful from just crushing everyone else?
Yeah.
There's nothing. There's no right if they say you can't, you can no longer have weapons. We're taking away your Second Amendment right. You don't have a Seventh Amendment right to take them to court over it anymore.
Right.
If they say we're shutting down the media, we're not going to allow you to speak about us at all, take away their First Amendment right. You don't have a Seventh Amendment right to bring them to trial, to hold them accountable. The way you destroy this nation is to eliminate the Seventh Amendment, because then there is no way to stop them.
And is that something you think is kind of, you feel like that's something that's kind of slowly the amendment's slowly eroding away? Do you feel like that, or do you feel like it's strong? I don't want to get too political here, but I'm kind of curious.
I'm trying not to get political either. So the wealthy insurance companies pushed this idea of tort reform, and they've been pushing it for a very long time.
Right.
They started it with a lie that centered around the McDonald's hot coffee case.
That's where it started?
Well, let me rephrase that. That's where it became known to me. Did it start there? I don't know. That was a seminal moment where I recognized what they were doing.
Okay.
And of course, anybody that knows anything about the McDonald's hot coffee case,
I know about it.
Yeah, knows that, first of all, Stella Liebeck didn't get nearly enough money for what she went through, that McDonald's had over 700 complaints in writing about their coffee being too hot for human consumption, and please turn it down because it's burning people, before Stella Liebeck, and all of those things. But of course, then they blow it out of proportion. And I've heard people say that, oh yeah, she got $20 million. No, she didn't. But they then took that and if it wasn't the start, it was certainly a pivotal moment for the tort reform movement, right? And so certainly in Texas, but in other jurisdictions as well, they push this lawsuit abuse, right? And a lot of times when I talk about it, I'm like, when is the last time that you ever heard trial lawyer without the word greedy in front of it?
Yeah, we were talking about that before we came on the podcast.
Right. And when's the last time you heard lawsuit without frivolous put in front of it?
Yeah.
I mean, it just shocks the conscience to think that every lawyer is greedy and every lawsuit is frivolous, and it's the lawsuit lottery. First of all, as a trial lawyer who tries cases and has to put his money and his time and his energy into those lawsuits, that is one expensive lottery ticket. For sure. You may not win. There's no guarantee you're going to get that money back. Absolutely not. And in places like Texas, the chances are very high that if you do get a big verdict, our appellate court systems will take it away from you. And so, and we know that. I also tell people that the frivolous lawsuit issue is so crazy because before I ever take the case, before I ever sign it up, I'm the first jury. I got to make sure that I believe in it before I'm ever going to put my time, my energy, and my talent into it. Right. And so going back to what you asked me, is the Seventh Amendment under attack? Yes, it's under attack. It's under attack from wrongdoers or the insurance companies that have to pay for the wrongdoers who have been paying for those wrongs, don't like paying for those wrongs. So they've demonized people that do what I do so that they can walk into a courtroom, call me a greedy trial lawyer, call this a frivolous lawsuit, and try to hold those verdicts down. But they've also funded a lot of the legislation, like caps and all of the tort reform legislation that we see. Right. So is the Seventh Amendment under attack? Absolutely, it's under attack. So I'm glad you bring this up because I told you what we do in our business. We have a client in Louisiana. He's a medical malpractice lawyer,
And I don't know if you do practice in Louisiana at all, or is that not one of your states? I know you said you're in 7 states, right?
I'm in 6.
6.
I have good friends in Louisiana. One of them is a medical malpractice attorney.
Oh,
But
what's
I
his
don't
name?
practice there. Scott Weber is a good friend of mine.
Okay.
He's in Lafayette.
The guy we work with, his name's Chip Wagar, and he's trying. There's a med mal cap in the state of Louisiana. I think it's $100,000, which is crazy. He has a client who had the wrong leg amputated in a surgery, and the max that this guy could get was I think it's $100,000, and so he's trying to enact change in the state house and get those caps either removed or raised, and it's been very, very difficult for him to do. And I'm just curious, in your mind, what can we do, not just with caps, but just to protect the 7th Amendment? What do people need to do to make sure that it stays where it is, and works the way it's supposed to work?
I think people need to be made aware. There's so much of a lack of awareness out there. When I talk to people, it really amazes me how little people realize about their rights and about the fact that they're being taken, the fact that they're being eviscerated. And it's, and again, I'm not trying to wax political, but it does break down political lines, and people of one political party often, or the other, either party, don't look beyond what are the actual issues. Like, what are we fighting about here? And when you really look at it, and when you really understand what's happening, you should vote that way, or at least call your congressman and say, look, our party's wrong on this issue. Let's vote this way. I have seen, I've done some work with the Texas trial lawyers, and I've seen a little bit of how the political process works. And I'll tell you, sometimes you can cross the aisle, even today, even now,
100%
on certain issues when you're right on an issue. And we've seen that, and I respect that. And again, I respect it on both sides. There are issues worth crossing the aisle for.
I agree 100%. Man, Todd, I could talk to you all day, man. You've enlightened me this morning or this afternoon. I really appreciate what you're bringing to the table. I want to get in real quick before we finish up. I want to talk about your book a little bit. Worth Dying For. Right. Tell me a little bit about the book, the genesis of that, how people can get it. Talk to me a little bit about the book. So
the book it's available on Amazon. That's my tabbed copy from when I do presentations about it. But it stirred in my head for quite a while. At the end of that case that we've talked about in this podcast, the verdict did not go my way. As I mentioned, I had not been walking with Jesus. I'd been doing a lot of things that I wasn't proud of, including being unfaithful to my then wife. All of that kind of came unraveled at the same time. And I lost that case. Found myself wallowing in self-pity and alcohol for about 3 days before I crawled into a closet, put a 9mm pistol in my mouth, and was sure that my life was over.
Wow.
I wrestled with those demons for about 45 minutes, at which point I was shown a vision of what my boys were going to find if I pulled that trigger. And I'd already done enough damage. I couldn't complete the act. I put the gun down, went back to my self-pitying, and the rest is in the story. But so that's from that point on in time, the idea of writing about it kind of circulated, but I didn't take action until a very prominent attorney in Texas took his life. And I wasn't close with him, but I knew him and I knew of him. And in my view, my worldly view, the man had everything. I couldn't understand, why did he take his life? And I recognized that suicide in our profession is an epidemic. It has to be addressed. And so I thought, well, maybe my struggle is worth talking about. By this point, I was kind of pulled back out of my slump, and I was gaining some notoriety again, and I was at least well thought of. And so I thought maybe my voice will matter. And so I started just putting pen to paper, or in truth, I was hitting the keyboards. I wasn't putting pen to anything, but I started writing my story initially just for trial lawyers. I had a very narrow audience that I started writing about. But then I started thinking about other people who had taken their lives. And the more that I started writing and the more that I started expanding, I realized this is applicable, yes, to my profession, very much so. But it's also applicable to so many other professions, especially those that deal with secondhand stress. Think clergy, doctors,
military.
Cops, military.
Yeah.
All these people that deal with this secondhand stress. Of course, military, oftentimes it's firsthand, not necessarily secondhand, but
right.
But military too, and it's appropriate. And so I started diving deeper and started asking myself, where did all of this come from in me? How did I find myself in that closet? Or, I knew what the immediate problems were, but how did I find myself creating the situation that caused me to want to then take my life? And it went back a lot longer, a lot farther than I realized when I started digging into it. And it just kind of told me that, look, we all have this journey. But 5 years after that closet moment is when my wife, who was not yet my wife, but she decided we need to go to this church. Mm-hmm. She walked into a church, and I was actually out of town on a trial. And she said, you got to come to this church. It was amazing. And so I started going to the church with her. And eventually, as time went on, the Lord did his work in me. And what I realized, and it took that 5 years plus to realize that in that closet, that vision wasn't an accident. Jesus was in that closet with me. I just didn't recognize him in the state I was in.
Right.
So it became a story about my walk of faith and my return to faith. And, it's not the only story out there. I've heard so many others that are very similar, actually.
Right.
But it's one that it's important to me because it's mine. And it's important that these stories are shared. We are saved by the blood of Christ and by the word of our testimony. And so I accept the blood of Christ. This is the word of my testimony.
Man, that's powerful stuff, Scott. Todd, I like I said, I could go on for another hour with you.
Enjoyed it.
I'm so glad that you got the book written, and I'm so glad that you made that choice in that closet as opposed to the other choice that you could have made. It's because it sounds like I know that you are making a difference for a lot of people out there. For people that are out there, I know you say practice in 6 different states. Can you let people know how they can get in touch with you, how they can find you, how they can find the firm? I want to give you a second to kind of let people know that.
Sure. Well, it's on the line online. Excuse me. We're at www.lonestarlegal.com. Our phone number is 7373-LN-STAR, which is 737-356-7827 for those who don't have a old phone that has numbers on it. But that's probably the best way to reach us. But and then my email, if you wanted to email me directly, is todd@lonestarlegal.com.
Awesome. Todd, again, what a great conversation. And again, thank you for your service in so many different ways to the country, to your clients, to and not just militarily to the country, but like what you're doing to advocate for the 7th Amendment and with forced arbitration. It's amazing stuff. And I hope that you keep the good fight going. And thank you for sharing your story and your faith with us. Really do appreciate it. This has been a really powerful 40 minutes here, man. And I want to have you back on again. Yeah, it's been really great. Those of you who are watching the podcast live out there, we appreciate you guys tuning in. And we appreciate you giving us the likes and the stars and the thumbs and all that good stuff. It's super important to get the show out to more people so we can get stories like Todd's out to more people as well. And if you're watching the recorded version, we appreciate you guys as well. I'll be back in a little while later this afternoon with another episode, and I hope that they can bring as much to the table, as much good stuff to the table here as Todd has today. No pressure, next guest, but you got a hard act to live up to. Todd, awesome, man. Really enjoyed this, and I want to have you back on, and I'll be back in just a little while with another episode, and we'll see you then back on P4P.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.